David Clendon.
Thank you. Mr Speaker, this is a week when one could almost feel some sympathy for the Minister of Finance. He's no doubt worked very hard to get the government books in order and to generate, at least on paper, a surplus of $1.8 million. His colleague from the ACT Party is quite keen to disperse that on tax cuts. No doubt other ministers are quite keen equally to spread some largesse around as we approach election year. But sadly, for all those prospective big spenders, this money, the surplus, alleged surplus, and much more besides, is about to disappear into a very deep, dark hole. It's going to disappear into concrete and wire and electronic alarms and steel doors. In short, we're about to see another orgy of prison building. Completely unhelpful, completely counterproductive, but apparently this government's only solution. So it must be particularly galling for Mr English, recalling that 5 years ago he was the minister who was brave enough and honest enough to publicly state that prisons are a moral and a fiscal failure, and to express the hope that the Wirri prison would be the last new prison we saw built in New Zealand for a very long time. Sadly, 5 years on, we're about to see another 80 men jammed into an already crowded facility at Ngā We're about to see, we know that as the numbers rise in that prison, so too will the tension levels, the stress levels, the outbreaks of violence inevitably will follow. We're about to see a 245-bed expansion at Mount Eden, the site of this government's dangerous and disastrous experiment with private prison management, so well described a few minutes ago by our colleague Mr Davis. And the jewel in the crown, the new jewel in the government's corrections crown, a 1,500-bed facility at Waikeria. So our prison muster is at historically high levels. In 1995, we had fewer than 4,500 people in prison. By 2005, despite a drop in the crime rate, despite less offending, we nevertheless had seen the muster climb to some 7,500. And 11 years on, very soon we can expect to exceed 10,000 people in prison. So this huge increase is not the result of more offending. It is not because New Zealanders are becoming more lawless. It is not inevitable. It is not irreversible. So the increase in the muster, the number of people we are pointlessly putting away, is due to a failure of public policy, a flawed belief that you can punish people into getting better. So a completely misguided belief against all the evidence and against logic that spending more money on locking more people away for longer is a better solution than addressing the causes of offending and reoffending. So it's after almost 20 years of penal populism, of being tough on crime, has delivered an entirely predictable, negative and costly result. And this government's solution, announced this week, is more of the same. We are seeing a complete failure of imagination, a complete failure of political courage, the courage to make change despite the obvious and glaring need to do so. So the government seems to be locked into a model that if you have a problem, you build your way out of it. The roads are congested. Let's build more roads. A burgeoning prison population. We'll build some more prisons. We'll create more capacity to lock people away. Let's impose more financial cost, more human misery. Maybe eventually it'll all come right. Well, actually, no, it won't. We do need to change. All the evidence says that, and that's something that the Greens in a government would and will do. So we need a complete change, a break from the failed practice of the past. We need to develop and deliver an integrated strategic program of investment into keeping people out of jail. A radical proposition for this government. Let's invest in keeping people out of jail rather than spending money keeping more people in. I know it's difficult to comprehend, but I'm sure they can get there. So I've recently visited 2 countries where they are getting it right. I visited Norway and Finland, countries with populations around 20% bigger than ours, prison populations 60% less. They've learned a lesson over time that investing long-term secure investment in real solutions is actually the way to reduce your prison population. Humane treatment, both in prisons and in the community, commitment to long-term strategic integrated management of the problem rather than a knee-jerk default to the failed policies of the past. Kia ora.